we welcome you to Naspalo. We are going to be exploring the ideological foundations about the Cold War. I'm Montel, your host, and my co-hosts here are Jonah, Zach, and Glenn. Alright, let's dive into our topic. The Cold War happened during 1947 to 1991. The Cold War isn't an actual war. It was mainly about an ongoing political rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respected allies that started near the end of World War II. In October 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution had to replace Russia's provisional government with the dictatorship of the proletariat or workers to establish the communist state, and the Bolsheviks had withdrawn Russia from World War I and left Britain and France to fight alone. Zach, can you explain the ideological foundations?
To understand the ideological conflict of the Cold War, it is first important to understand the main principles of capitalism, communism, democracy, and dictatorship. The Soviet Union was a communist nation that was based on the principles of collectivism, while the United States was a modern liberal nation based primarily on the principles of individualism. The United States has a capitalist economy where property usually belongs to individuals. Did you know the Soviet Union was a communistic country? Communism is an economic system where most property belongs to the government. The main people in that period were Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin and U.S. President Harry S. Truman. Those two were the main leaders during that time. The Cold War started after Nazi Germany surrendered in 1945. It had been an uneasy alliance between the United States and Great Britain on the one hand and the Soviet Union on the other, and it quickly started to fall apart. It's kinda crazy how there were consequences even if it wasn't an actual war. Hey Glenn, can you tell us what were the consequences?
The consequences of the Cold War affected the world order socially, economically, and politically, shifting around the moments of peace that the United Nations strove to maintain. Because of the Cold War, there was intensive indoctrination of the American people that led regression of social reforms, especially regarding the civil rights, labor units, working condition, and women's coercion. During that time, the economic trade rates dropped to 10 to 15, less than 5% of global trade during the Cold War. Because of that led to inflation after the Cold War, and the trade bloc increased rapidly, almost reaching the core of the world trade in the following decade.
The role for society in communism was to operate a force that socially organized communities such as tribes, classes, constituencies, and societies, and for the economic growth of the complex issue domains. Political knowledge could be necessary to individuals that understand the implication of the different propositions and relate to values and needs. In capitalism, everyone can own private property. In communism, only the government owns private property. Because of this, the United States values their citizens' happiness, because if you work hard and get paid well, you can buy the things you want. However, the Soviet Union values that everyone is equal and that no one is too rich or too poor. Communist countries such as the Soviet Union are also often dictatorships. Communism differs from capitalism because it focuses on the government having much more control over the economy and is often referred to as a command economy. Hey Zach, Why was ideology the main source of the conflict?
The difference in ideology was a major source of the conflict between the two nations because throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union sought to expand communism to other regions, and the United States sought to stop it with its policy of containment. As such, many people now view the Cold War as a conflict of the left and right sides of the spectrum, as well as between the people and cultures of the East and West. These ideological foundations had many negative influences on the world society. It created an unstable political world. There were also positive influences on the war that triggered economic growth as factories shifted production to meet the demands of the war, which led to an increase in employment and a raise in wages as well as military equipment. The United States emerged from war as an economic powerhouse with its industries booming and its positions in international trade strengthened.
The Cold War helped reshape our society, economic, and political world. There was a sense of uncertainty about the future doing that, powerlessness, and fear. The main focus of the US during the Cold War was to halt the spread of communism and limit its influence where it already existed. The American politicians believed that promoting democracy would expand for each person's liberties for people everywhere. During the 1940s, the US reversed the traditional reluctance to become involving in European affairs. The Truman Doctrine was pledged aid to governments threatened by the communist subversion, and the Marshall Plan was provided over $1 billion in economic assistance to eliminate political instability and opened ways to the communist takeover of democratically elected governments. The only reason why the Cold War ended was during 1989 to 1990. The Berlin Wall came to an end, borders opened, and free elections got rid of communists. Used the method everywhere in Eastern Europe. In late 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved into its component republics. With stunning speed, the Iron Curtain was lifted and the Cold War came to an end. The Cold War was important to American history because it was a period of extreme cultural and political tension, while the country became involved in many countries around the world. American society was also heavily influenced by the conflict, and much of that influences lives today. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to Jack Badkey.